Welcome to Time for the Soul. Today, we're going to be talking about the Enneagram. So I'm going to share my screen. And for those who don't know, the Enneagram is an ancient, very, very old, nobody really knows how old, um, sort of personality typing idea or philosophy or theory, but it's been used in spiritual circles for a long time to think about how we are as individuals and how we relate to each other as people. And so the Enneagram has a lot of layers to it. It can be very complicated or sometimes even confusing. But once you start exploring and diving into it, it can be a great insight into who you are, how you relate to the world, how you relate to others, and it especially incorporates that sort of spiritual lens or spiritual aspect. So one thing that's important about the Enneagram is that it is a personality type, but it is guided by your motivations and not your behaviors. So it's not about how you act as a person. It's not about the type of person you are based on your actions. You may find that you relate or feel like because of your profession or just your birth order or how you are in your family or how you operate in the world or your career, that you feel like you're one type. But then when you actually dive deeper and explore the motivations behind that type and how they relate to the world, what motivates them in the world, it can be interesting to see if those two things line up. So some people think the Enneagram goes back as long as 4,000 years. This symbol, especially of the 9-pointed sort of star, has been around as far back as that long. But more modern psychologists and psychospiritual psychologists have incorporated the Enneagram into a more practical and understandable kind of format. And so that's what we'll be looking at today. So first of all, what is the Enneagram? Well, we're going to watch a short video, which will dive a little bit deeper into answering that question. Let's see.
Everyone has that one Enneagram obsessed person in their life.
Have you heard of the Enneagram? What's your Enneagram? Let me try to guess your Enneagram.
Have you heard of the Enneagram? And you've probably been wondering, what the heck is an Enneagram? But don't you worry, because I'm going to give you a quick rundown so that you can understand your Enneagram obsessed friends, or you can become just as obsessed with the Enneagram as me. So what is it? The Enneagram is a personality categorizing system. It theorizes that there are 9 different personality types in the world, and each type sees the world in a different way. Plus, each type has an underlying motivation that runs throughout their whole lives that totally influences how they behave and how they feel. So you may be saying, isn't it like super limiting to say that there's only 9 types of people in the world? And to that I say, haha, no, because there's like infinite expressions of all of the numbers. This is the Enneagram. I know that this probably looks like some pagan symbol or a mad mathematician's ramblings, but bear with me. The 9 types are 1, the perfectionist, 2, the helper, 3, the performer, 4, the romantic, 5, the investigator, 6, the loyalist, 7, the enthusiast, 8, the challenger, and 9, the peacemaker. So there's 3 triads. These describe different ways that you experience life. The gut triad is 8, 9, and 1, and they are driven by anger and express themselves directly and honestly. The heart triad, which is my triad, is 2, 3, and 4, and they are driven by feelings and they can be extremely image conscious. The head triad is 5, 6, and 7. They are driven by fear and think and plan carefully before acting. So each number can have a wing, so that's basically like the number's neighbor. So if my head is the number 8, I can either be a 8-wing 9 or an 8-wing 7, just depending on what my personality like leans towards. Okay, I know that's a lot of numbers and stuff, and as someone who hates math, I am like, why am I spending my free time thinking about numbers and stuff? But when you know the meanings behind the numbers, it is like super fascinating. Stay tuned for my Enneagram series. I'm gonna be making 9 videos about all 9 Enneagram types, all the annoying.
So that's basically a place where you can look at more types if you want to follow her channel. But to give you a sense of what the different types are, right? So she went through 1 through 9. So the assessment, which I'll post in the chat below, I like to think of it more as like the sorting hat in Harry Potter, right? And please ignore the pagan reference in that comment in the video, but that's unnecessary. But the reason I say that is because one of the ways that you can discover your type is by taking a quiz, or it's kind of like a magazine quiz, right? An online assessment. And there's lots of different versions of this. Sometimes it's good to take more than one, because sometimes you'll find that you'll get a different result each test that you take. But others say don't take a test at all, right? Don't rely on somebody else to tell you your Enneagram number. In fact, one of the cardinal rules of the Enneagram is not to guess anybody else's number, right? Because again, this is not a test that's motivated by behaviors. It's through your motivation, how you see the world. And so only you can know that. One thing that you can do, or one thing that's recommended, is to actually take a look at all of the different types. So read through what the different type descriptions are, and then see what pops out to you. See what feels like it's describing who you are, both your strengths and your weaknesses. And then you can look at the wings, which we'll get into a little bit later, to notice whether you lean towards one wing or the other, perhaps. So nobody's just one thing, right? We sort of share that understanding of our personality with other types and other parts of ourselves. So this is an overview of what was named in the video about the different types. And there's different names that have been given to these types. So number 1s are the peacemaker, or sometimes called the reformer. 2s are the helper. 3s are an achiever. 4, the originalist. Other words are romantic or the artist. 5 is the sage. 6, the loyalist. 7, the enthusiast. 8, the challenger, and 9, the peacemaker. So in the center of this diagram, you'll also see that she talked a little bit about how there's triads. So the 8, 9, and 1 are governed by the gut or the body, right? 2, 3, and 4 by the heart, and 5, 6, and 7 by the head. And she talked a little bit about emotions associated with that. And again, don't get too caught up in what you're governed by, right, within these numbers, but it's just a little bit more about what's kind of your first instinct in terms of how you react. Do you feel with your heart? Are you sort of emotion centered? Are you thinking, trying to figure it out, head centered? Or are you instinctual, right, going with your gut instinct? So just to give you another way of looking at this, right, we have the types down 1 through 9, and then there's ideal behaviors, right? Sometimes the values, or sometimes called a core value for that type. Then there's also your biggest fear, your biggest desire, and a vice. And so again, there's lots of different sides to these different personalities or these different types. No one is perfect and no one is bad, right? They're all with good and bad contained within it. So this is a little bit broader perspective of what we might say about these different types. And next we have another graphic, which I want to point your attention to the arrows that are shown here, right? So in the arrows, you'll see that they're pointing towards a number, right, kind of across from them in this 9-pointed diagram of the Enneagram. And that's intentional, right? So how the Enneagram is actually laid out is quite fascinating in terms of which type, when they're stressed, goes towards what number. So that's what these arrows currently are indicating, right? When a type 1 is feeling stressed, they sort of tend to move towards an individualist, right? They become more isolated, they become more, solitary, and sometimes that can result in something like the starving artist, right? Like, nobody understands me and I am all alone in who I am in the world, right? That's actually a 1 out of line, right? Not necessarily a person who's a true artist, who's sort of motivated by their art and creativity, right? That's a healthy 4, right? Which is different than a kind of unhealthy out 1. The opposite is also true. If you're a 1 and you go in the other direction towards a 7, that can be feeling more aligned, feeling more healthy, right? So that's just an example. Finally, she talked a little bit about the wings, right? So for example, if you're a 9, you can have either a 1 wing or an 8 wing, right? You could be a peacemaker, but in times of social justice, become a challenger, right? Or you could be a peacemaker, 9, but have a lot of perfectionist tendencies where you feel like a reformer, like you can make good decisions and understand how to organize the things in front of you. Just some examples. So this image gives you a little bit broader understanding of the different types, right? She mentioned that there's 9 types, but then with the wings, it starts to become very complicated, right? So as we go around the circle, you can see that, being one type, but with various wings gives you lots of different types of personalities. Okay, so one of the things that can be really powerful is to read about all of the types, see what your 1 number is or feels like, and then look at the wings and feel into how you might, maybe in one point of your life, you leaning towards 1 wing, and another point of your life, you're leaning the other way. And that's perfectly normal with this model. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, a little bit more about the some examples of how this works. So as you see on this graphic, we have when folks, I use the phrase stressed or aligned, but here we have expansive or contracted, right? So the arrow pointing in one direction is when you're feeling more contracted, right? Less like yourself, and in the other direction, more expansive. So to give you an example, right? This is the 1 again. If you're a 1, right, you could have either a 9 or a 2 wing. If you have a 9 wing, they call that the mediator, right? So you're a 1, you are a reformer, you're very organized, you care deeply about following the rules, about you understand kind of what's right and just. And if you have a 9 wing, that makes you a peacemaker. And so you're good at mediating conversations, right? You're good at sort of having both the peacemaker side, which can sometimes not want to get involved in anything, or just kind of a 9 will sometimes just want to make everybody happy, right? And won't be able to reform a situation. Whereas if you're a 1 with that 9 wing, you can be a mediator or can serve well to do that. Anybody can do anything, but this is just showing how you're motivated in life, how you see the world and relate to others. On the other hand, if you're a 1 with a 2 wing, the 2s are the helpers, right? And so that person can become a giver, right? And I talked a little bit about 1 going towards a stress point of the romantic, how that can make them feel a little bit isolated and alone. On the other hand, if you go towards a 7, that's in here, it's called a security point, right? You can feel like you can do anything, right? And can be very charismatic and be a strong leader. Okay. So that's just an example. So and also to say on this slide that if you're exploring your type, right, it's not just about what the description of that number is, it's also about all these other aspects and components. The wings, where your stress point is, where your security point is, when you feel contracted, when you feel at peace, when you feel balanced, right? And all of that can give you insights into how you are motivated in the world and how you relate to others. So finding your type, here's a lot of lists and examples, right? But it's helpful to learn a little bit about what you're looking for in order to find your type. And so there's a couple videos there. Like I said, taking a couple of tests and then reading the overviews of the types, right? If you search for Enneagram, there's a number of websites that can do this. I will say some of the tests you have to pay for, so just be mindful of that. You might want to try out some of the free versions first. And then the YouTube channel we just looked at has a lot of different options on how to learn more about your number once you find out what that is. There's also some great podcasts out there, including a podcast based on this book, The Road Back to You, which is one of the most popular, I would say, Enneagram books out there. There's also, as mentioned here, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, which is definitely a more deep dive into the psycho-spiritual aspects of the Enneagram. And then finally, I found this book really enjoyable. I've been reading it lately. It's called The Millennialgram, and it's a more modern, updated version of how we can use the Enneagram in our lives today, with a little bit less of the older psychology built into that. And I will say that The Road Back to You does have some Christian roots and Christian foundations. So just keeping that in mind. So I hope this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about your Enneagram. We'd love to hear in the chat if you figured out what your type is, if it resonated for you, if there's anything else that you're curious about as it relates to the Enneagram, or maybe we could do some small groups around Enneagram typing, which might be of interest to some people. So thank you. Again, my name is Maeba Jonas, and I want to just invite you to come back to Time for the Soul. We're going to be here every Thursday, doing a little bit of a break, a little bit of something to just get you out of your head and into your body and into your heart and spirit. And we hope you enjoy. Take care.